Hello, Crafty Crandall fam. Today I am doing a review video of the Winsor & Newton Cotman Watercolors. It has been a while since I have done a review video, but I received these from Christmas and I am really excited to share them with you because I have often heard these specific watercolors touted as the best beginner watercolors across so many different videos that I have watched. So I am really excited to try them here for you today as someone who has done watercolor for about 6 years now and never used these as a beginner. I have since used several of the Winsor & Newton professional watercolors, which are more of their artist line. But these are their student grade watercolors, and I'm really interested to see how they perform, having had experience with the quote-unquote higher end version of this paint before. For me personally, it would not be a fair watercolor comparison to any of my existing artist watercolors if I did not put these into pans, because I typically use pan watercolors or squeeze all of my tube watercolors into pans, let them dry, and then use them. So I did that with these. Again, I don't use watercolor from the tube pretty much ever, so I didn't think that it would be fair of me to review these doing so. I found this process really easy, and it was very interesting how these specific watercolors were all of the same consistency. I feel like every other watercolor that I have used that's been in a tube form has had different colors be very different consistency. So I found that very interesting with these, and I appreciated it. Honestly, it was a lot easier to put them all in the tube, having them be the same consistency. We saw in the beginning the light fastness ratings and the pigment information is on the tubes, so that is super handy. And as you'll see at the end, they also give you a pamphlet with that information so that you have it readily at hand when you buy these watercolors. First impressions right off the bat, I thought that these were very easy to use. They re-wet beautifully. I was really impressed. I let these dry overnight and then I went in and I swatched them. I thought that the colors were very true to what I would have imagined that they would be, given, you know, what was on the tube, what it looked like in the pan, and just having used a lot of these types of colors in the past, I thought that they were really true to what I thought that color should be. And I think that overall this set has every color that you're going to need to get started. So from that perspective, definitely a good beginner set as far as color range. 12 colors is what I use in my travel palette, so I do think that that is a good complement of colors to start with. And laying down the colors, I thought that they performed really well. Honestly, I don't really see much of a difference between these and my Sennelier Artist watercolors. I thought that they were basically the same. They seemed to be really high quality, and I had a lot of fun working with them. The swatches don't necessarily do them justice in my opinion, and I do plan on working with these more in the future so that you can kind of get a better idea with them. When I do that, hopefully I can remember to come back to this video and add some cards for you of paintings that I have done with these watercolors, but in the meantime, here are the swatches, and then we are going to jump into doing just a small painting with these paints so that you can get an idea of how they work. So I started with just a quick sketch of a sunflower that I had seen on someone's Instagram page, and it was a sunflower that was in Oregon. Probably not important. I started off with just a flat wash, and I was able to achieve what in my opinion was such a good flat wash with these watercolors. I think that they were really easy to work with, keep wet, and worked very well on this B watercolor paper. So this is not an expensive watercolor paper. This is just what I use, like what I would anticipate a beginner would use, and it's very inexpensive on Amazon, and it worked beautifully. These paints laid down fantastically and didn't cause really any warping of the paper either, which is more a testament to the paper than the paints, but overall just a very good beginner friendly watercolor experience. They mixed very well in the palette. I did use a porcelain palette, but it really shouldn't matter. The paints mix very well, and overall I didn't have any trouble with any like beading or any extraneous kind of like granulation. Sometimes in lower quality watercolors I can definitely notice that there's just like extra little granules left behind, and I did not have that experience at all with these watercolors, so I really appreciated that. Again, I just did another flat wash for the bottom. Worked just as well as the first one, honestly. It was really, again, an enjoyable experience. And then I dove into using kind of more of the wet on wet technique here with the leaves, which the paints do spread quite a bit. I was a little bit taken aback by that. I guess I wasn't really expecting it, so just be aware of that. Not a problem. This is, you know, a property of watercolor. Watercolors do that in water. It just, I think, went a little bit more out of hand than I was anticipating, so I ended up having to kind of try to fix it there at the end. The paints also dried a little bit slower than I'm used to. I think that, you know, I'm an impatient painter. Normally I will have a heat gun or something to speed along the drying process, but in working with these I just wanted to get a feel for how quickly they actually dry, and I kept having to go back to different parts of the painting to lay down the wet part because they did dry slower than I think my Sennelier paint. Again, this could be a property of the paper. The paper itself is not, you know, absorbing as much of the water, so it's drying slower. So don't 100% attribute that to the paint itself. This could also be due to the fact that I use more water than maybe a lot of other painters. So that was just my personal feeling. You know, with my painting style, I felt like it dried a little bit slower than I was anticipating. Not a problem, just an observation. Overall, I felt like these watercolors performed just as well as any high-end watercolor that I personally have used. Now that only encompasses probably 3 or 4 of the brands that you're familiar with, but it was just a really great experience. They lifted really well, wet on wet, wet on dry, didn't matter, they worked great. I also really appreciated that the pamphlet gave you some tips on how to use these paints. For a beginner, that is just phenomenal. It gives you a jumping off point, and I can 100% understand why these watercolors are recommended so frequently for beginners. Now, having used them and will continue to use them, I wholeheartedly agree. If you are a beginner looking for a fantastic set of watercolors that don't break the bank, this set is 100% a great place to start. Winsor & Newton Cotman, fantastic job. I'm super impressed, and I very much look forward to continuing to use these paints in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope that you enjoyed it, learned something, and will give it a like and a comment down below. Thank you so much. Bye.